Welcome to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today, and I am super excited. Now, while I'm excited, y'all should be excited too. Do the things, like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff, get your emails whenever we go live, which is, of course, Fridays for The Collective and Wednesdays for The Gold Mine. Now, we have two returning vets, but from a while ago, we got Sam and Sara joining us today once again, and I am stoked for this. Now, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, put them up in the comment section. We can hit those throughout the show. And if you want to stay in the loop with everything that goes on with The Collective, make sure you're signed up for the Reinforcement Loop, our weekly newsletter that goes out every single Sunday. So, without further ado, let's get into the guests. Sam, it's been a while. Give me a quick 10 to 15 seconds. Who are you, where you come from, all that good stuff. Give her.
I'm just a guy catching up with old friends. No, I'm a Christian, I'm a father, I'm a partner, founder of Laird & Co. A bit of my background for the last decade, I've been working in the well-being and mental fitness space, and before that, Home Marines Commando. And I don't like to mention my black belts anymore because I've not trained for 18 months, so I feel like a fraud.
Well, we'd have to actually do a whole show on this, on whether or not people can be demoted over time.
Yeah, I should be demoted.
I think people would start to jump in color all the time. It'd be crazy. Sara, how about yourself?
Well, yeah, thank you guys so much for having me back. It's such a pleasure to be here and catch up with everybody. But I'm out in Dallas, Texas, and the mom working in healthcare, training jujitsu, and just trying to do the good life.
Bam. A good life is a very worthy thing to follow. Now, Sean, how about yourself? How's your worthy life going down in the mountains?
It's good. Much like Sam, I think that I've probably had a few belts that I've had to hand in from time to time, and only to re-rent them again, a couple years later or whatever the case is. But isn't that the beautiful part, though, of life? It's not a one and done. The belt is not a one and done. Like the black belt that you get is the black belt that you have to put up on the dusty shelf for a while, only to pick it up later and tie it back on. It's still your black belt. And, there's always going to be those moments in life, the ebbs and flows of belt on, belt off, new belt, old belt. I love it, man.
It's awesome. I know you and I were talking a little while yesterday, about a couple days ago, about this, and the fact that, like, I love the way you put that, though, that they're rented, not owned, which is really cool. But let's get into the topic. Here we go. The tonic for toxic. We're going to talk about all things toxic and what to do about them. But right off the bat, when you guys got the email this morning, what were your guys' first thoughts? Sam, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
Yeah, I went straight to kind of what toxic is, like some of the things I was thinking that come down to people, that have lack of self-awareness. It's a lack of trust. It's a lack of communication. A lot of times when I go into cultures, you can tell very quickly, can't you, whether it's a toxic culture or a healthy culture, and what is that? And then I'm really looking forward to talking about tonight what the tonic is. And you kind of said it a little bit in the bio when you shared this. It was about, living. So you need to be bringing life. You need to be leading. Well, what's healthy leadership? So I'm sure some of those things will come into play tonight.
Oh, yes. Sara, what were your first thoughts?
Yeah, so like I was telling you earlier, I actually laughed pretty hard when I read the topic. I was just explaining to them, Sean, that it's been a pretty big year, I think, of shedding a lot of fat personally, and just realigning myself so that I didn't feel so much pressure in different ways and things that promoted me to be toxic or have different alignments that brought toxicity into my life, whether it was professional or interpersonal, and a lot of really just realigning myself so that it felt authentic in what I was seeking, and how that essentially taking away all of that, toxicity helped me realign and feel really successful across many different areas.
This is going to be an awesome conversation already, I can tell. Sean, what were your first thoughts?
Well, you know what? I didn't have a pile of thoughts before the show because, generally speaking, I rarely know what the topic is going to be. So I kind of find out what the topic is when the panel is finding out. And so I did think about it this morning, and I've got some notes. I wrote down some notes. There's lots of things to talk about, but I'm going to throw that all to the side for a second and just say this, because this is what I feel in the moment. This is just the real in the moment sort of extension of my thoughts. One of the things that I've always appreciated about Sam and Sara when they've been on the podcast in the past is they bring a certain sense, not even a certain, they bring a legitimate sense of being calm and grounded and positive, and a bunch of other words that I string together in my mind, and I simply categorize as they've got a cool vibe. They're good people. It's a good room. I feel good about this place. Those are the kind of things that I think about when I think about toxic versus not. And so, as Sam said, when you step into a room or when you step into a moment, you know what's up. You either know it intellectually, or you know it in your gut, or you know it primordially, or you know it somehow. You know it. But perhaps you haven't developed the language for it. Perhaps you haven't connected the feelings to the extension of the outcomes or the actions or the more constructed version of what this all means. Perhaps it's just like a cognitive dissonance that you just don't know why it feels off in some rooms and why it feels cool in other rooms. And by cool, I mean great. And so Sam and Sara, it's been a while since they've been on the show, but like right from the get-go, the moment they both spoke, I just thought, oh yeah, great. We're in a cool place with cool people. We're going to talk about a subject that's going to bring some good vibes to some other people out there. And what a great way to start a Friday. Am I wrong?
This is a pretty good way to get it going. Interestingly enough, when my first thoughts on this, when I was trying to figure out the title for the actual image on this, because I went through the gambit of toxicity, of like toxicity psychologically, physically. I was thinking about toxic sludge and ooze and things like that. But what really caught me when I tried to figure out what the opposite of toxic is. And I was thinking, is it purity? Is it cleanliness? Is it something like that? But it really stuck to the air. Like when you walk into air that is toxic, that is caustic, it's hard to breathe, it's hard to engage in your like natural functions. That always stuck to me. So when you breathe in clean air versus toxic air, it is a very illuminating moment. And Sara, to your point, when you start removing toxicity from your life of people or structures or even behaviors, then it's like breathing clean air almost, at least in my mind. What do you think, Sara?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that a lot of times, like we use toxic right now is a very trendy term to try to encompass a lot of things, but when we really get down to how it impacts us personally, I think it's really environmentally palpable. It's what we're eating, it's what we're exposing ourselves to, what we're reading, the people we're around. There's so much to it, and for us to, say that there is a tonic for it, I mean, I don't think that there's a one cure all for eliminating toxicity, but it's really about like finding what it is to you that makes you feel like you are in an environment where you can't breathe.
That's a great point. Sam, you got any thoughts on this?
You sent my head going straight into chemical warfare back in. I was an instructor for CBRN or NBC, whatever you call it, and it's put that gas mask on in the gas chamber. My head's gone there, which I didn't expect to tonight. But yeah, it's exactly what you're saying. You walk into that environment, it's energy zapping, isn't it? Where if you walk into a healthy environment, it's energy given. So it's being aware of that. It's obviously unhealthy, it's obviously negative, but it's about what the root of that toxicity is. Where does it come from? And that's where we've got to look a little bit deeper in the influences of life. And you know, everybody in this, even in this room, has different life experiences. We all got influenced in different things at different times of our life, whether that be healthy things or unhealthy things, and healthy role models and unhealthy role models, and they all make us up who we are to this day. So that's going to have a massive impact on whether someone brings something toxic into environment or something maybe more life-giving.
Interestingly enough, I was just laughing about this. My kids asked me about gas masks, and I started talking about being in the CS hut with doing all that stuff, and it does suck. Sean, you got any thoughts on any of this?
So you'd mentioned toxic air as kind of generally where you ended up at as kind of a proxy for this subject. And so just yesterday, I watched a video. I'm sure everyone's seen a version of it. It's typically race cars. They're coming into the pit. And as it comes into the pit, the driver's just there. And then all of a sudden, he's jumping out of the car and he's freaking out. And you don't understand why. And it's because he's invisibly on fire. Because of the fumes, the way that they're fueling up the cars. The driver doesn't look like he's on fire. The pit crew don't look like they're on fire, but they're all on fire. So you'll see them out on the track, like running around like lunatics, they're beating themselves and taking their helmets off, and you have no idea why. None. Unless you know that there's this thing called invisible fire. Now, we're not going to get into the science of it, just like we're not going to get into CBRN. But what it does act is as an example or as a contrasting position to, you walk into a place and the toxicity is like sticking to you. You can like touch it and it's like, you know, there's a lot in there. There's a lot of toxicity in that place. To the degree where it's so toxic that you probably should put a gas mask on. However, you can walk into some rooms and you have no idea it's toxic. None. Because it's invisibly toxic to you. But there'll be other people who know it's toxic, and there'll be people who have like even less idea than you do that it's toxic. That invisible flame, that invisible fire of toxicity, like Sam said, is probably learned through a process of, from the time you were a baby, what you were taught, what you learned, who was around you, who wasn't around you, where you went when you were 10, where you went when you were 20, where you went when you were 40, and etc. Your life. How many times you've been around the world, or how many times you haven't left your town. All of these things add up to our understanding of how the world turns. And if you've been in a boatload of toxicity positions, or you've been in zero, then that's what you understand. So in essence, the world is what you see based on what you've learned through your life. And I'm with Sam that the more that you are exposed to, and I'm not saying that being exposed to toxicity is a bad thing, only if you just don't learn from it. If you are presented with enough problems, if you are facing enough toxicity, then over time, with reflection and perhaps some mentors to teach you how to move through that stuff, not only will you become capable of managing toxicity, but you can, in effect, elevate beyond it and actually start to act as a kind of a shining beacon for others to understand where they can do better in their lives, either as a toxic person or dealing with a toxic person.
On that as well, I think what you find is a lot of people actually don't realize that they're part of that toxic problem, because they've almost just been brought up in toxic environments. So they don't realize what a healthy environment looks like. You know, I always think back to my dad said when he trained to be a doctor, and you're learning how to look at x-rays, they'll just show you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of good x-rays, not bad ones. So you know what a good one looks like. And then when they show you one that's got a problem, you're like, hold on, that doesn't look the same as the hundreds I've looked at. There's something up there. Let's look at that deeper, and almost flip that. A lot of people are just in toxic environments all the time, that's all they know. And then they don't realize that they were in it until they walk into another environment. They go, oh, wow, this is different. This is healthy. What's going on? But everyone plays their part in that. You know, negativity just spreads like wildfire, doesn't it? And we always think we're not the negative ones. So You know, you'll see someone negative and then you start telling somebody else about that negative person. Well, now you're the negative person because you're spreading it, and we can become part of that, you know, even with all good intentions. It's a really hard thing to fight off. So I'm really interested in what the tonic is that we discussed tonight.
We may not even get to a tonic. Sarah, what do you got?
Yeah, I just wanted to take a point that Sam was just saying. I totally agree with you and have been the problem many times. But what I think is really interesting is that, you know, as we have all these different experiences and we learn and grow, when we have that point that creates the cognitive dissonance that we're like, wait a second, like this is different. It must be wrong. Like that thing over there, which is actually probably the really good thing, it's different. It feels terrible. That must be toxic. And then finding out how to reframe and re-engage to reflect back and realize you're like, oh no, I'm the problem. It's me. Like, how do we now move past this and re-engage, or, you know, take a step back and be like, I'm sorry that I made this judgment. Can we please be friends again? Like, and I think that that's a really neat thing that happens all the time, but we don't really ever talk about it. We just kind of a lot of times go back to our previous like group think.
This is a great point, and it actually kind of leads into my question. But the thing that caught me a little bit earlier, I started thinking about Sean. I was talking about air, you were talking about the air, all that stuff. But it reminds me, do you guys remember smoking areas in like restaurants and stuff? And like how silly that was. And it was just like a little window that was like 3 inches off the booth kind of thing that separated smoking from non. And you would go in there. I choose no smoking. I'm going to go over here and not smoke and eat my dinner. But you would come out, you'd still smell like smoke. And like it would be in your clothes, and it would be there for a couple of days till you washed it and got clean and like all this other stuff. And it's similar. Toxicity walking into these things is similar to that, because sometimes you can go into an environment that is as you are, fresh and clean, but the moment you step out of it, as you guys said, some of your behaviors will shift and they will be toxic, and that'll just kind of follow you wherever you go without even realizing it. So what does it look like for you guys when you realize, oh man, what I just did was incredibly bad and toxic? Like, how do you rectify that in the moment? Sam, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
Well, it's just about being your authentic self a lot of the time, isn't it? But also understanding we're all human, we're all flawed, we all make mistakes. So how quickly can you firstly recognize your mistake and then make amends for it, whether that's apologize, whether that's change your behavior, which is a positive, by the way. People mix up that guilt and shame. You know, guilt is recognizing that you've done something outside of your value system. Well, that's a good recognition, because that means you can change that behavior and apologize for that behavior, hopefully. Where shame is something different. That's where you believe you are that behavior. So if you're in a toxic environment and you're full of shame of that, and you then believe you are that, that's a really hard thing to break. So separating those two things between guilt and shame there is really important. So yeah, you've got to recognize it in yourself. I think it's so important that you know who you are. And like I said, we're flawed, we make mistakes, but how quickly, it's about that accountability, isn't it? How quickly can you hold yourself to account and go on, hold on, I've messed up here. And it can be a simple thing, because you've maybe not slept well the night before. Maybe you've come into that environment not your best self. Maybe you didn't check in with yourself before you walked into it. You didn't even realize you were struggling. You've walked into a tough environment and you haven't presented yourself in who you are and your best self. So, you know, you've got to apologize. You've got to be quick to forgive, and you have to learn and move forward.
I love that. Absolutely love it. Sarah, you got any thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. For me, it's very much about, you know, being grounded in who I am, and then to having the discipline to look back. And it might not be right away, depending on the situation, how emotionally charged it is. It might take me personally like a few days to circle back around and be like, hey, like, I'm sorry, I was wrong, or whatever it may be. But ultimately, like, when I have a firmer concept of who I am, that correction comes much faster. And so if I'm feeling really off, then it's time to start taking inventory. It's like, okay, why am I responding so emotionally when normally I'm much more analytical? Like, what's happened? What's on my plate? Did this impact me more than I thought it did? And then just having that step back and then reflecting back on, whatever the situation was to be able to navigate forward and then change the course from there.
See, we're already getting a tonic already. This is awesome. Sean, what are you thinking?
Well, you'd asked a very broad and big conversation question of, well, what's the tonic to toxicity? I mean, come on. How's a person supposed to answer that?
I can't make it easy
Because,
for you
like,
guys.
are
Come on
you
now.
are you talking about like for the person, for the room, for the entire planet? You know, what are we talking about here? Is we will all default automatically to our tiny little life, our tiny little world. How can I become less toxic? Sometimes we'll go so far as to say, how can I solve my toxicity? And how can I solve their toxicity? And then sometimes we'll defer to, well, not my toxicity, it's them. And then maybe we'll defer to, well, it's the world's problem, not my problem. So, like, the scale of how we address the toxicity as the question, are we just talking about the four of us? Are we just talking about me? Are we talking about the planet? You know what I'm saying? And the reason I'm asking that question is because you talked about smoking, and you go in the little room and you smoke your, I call them coffin nails because that's exactly what they are. You smoke your coffin nail and you stink like smoke, and you get out and that stinks follows you around for a couple of days. And by the way, you're not the only one who's stinking. Everyone who's standing next to you is having to hang around your stink. And so what that made me think of was I was on an Alitalia flight back in the 90s, late 90s. I had to go and do some work in South America. And I was flying out of Europe to that location on the plane, and I was sitting in the no smoking section. But one seat ahead of me was the smoking section. And buddy in front of me was just cranking those coffin nails back like they were free. And the entire flight, all I could do was watch this guy, one after another, his cigarettes. I called over the flight attendant and said, hey, listen, how is it that this is the no smoking section? And she said, well, sir, I can't control that. And I said, well, go get me a piece of paper because I want to write a letter. I want to write a letter to Alitalia. And I'm not going to build out the story. Essentially, what I did was write a letter, gave it to the captain, and said, I expect a response. And I didn't think I'd ever get a response. But it was about, I don't know, maybe 2 years later, I got a letter from Alitalia saying, dear Mr. Taylor, we're pleased to let you know that as of whatever it was today or the week before, Alitalia is now a smoke-free airline. And I thought, that's fantastic. Obviously, that wasn't my doing. It was higher powers than me that had decided that we're going to do something about this. However, why I raise that subject is it brings to light the idea that you can step into a toxic environment that is completely out of your control. Completely. I couldn't stop everyone from smoking. It's not my responsibility. But I can action it higher. I can make someone aware. I can, quote unquote, put in a customer complaint. And I think that is one of the keys to this conversation today. Not the key, but a key. If you're stepping into toxicity or you're surrounded by it, even if you are it requires action to change it. And what is the action? Action means like doing something about it, of course. And action isn't just accepting the toxicity. And so hopefully during the rest of the podcast, we'll talk about some of the ways that you can do something about it. And I've just described a letter that was effectively worthless to Alitalia changing their ways, but it was worth something to me because that's what our personal agency is. If you give away your personal agency every single time you're in these moments, you're actually part of the toxicity. If you walk in not smelling like cigarette smoke and ask someone to hand you a pack of cigarettes and you don't smoke, not only are you like part of the problem, you're exacerbating the problem. And so I think that one of the tonics for toxicity is owning some personal agency and some personal responsibility in these moments where we feel like there's nothing we can do. And I disagree. There's always something you can do. It's how you do the do part that either changes the world or your little world or doesn't. If you come across with a cool way to do it, then maybe it'll be beneficial. If you come across as a jerk, it might make it worse. The toxicity doubles down now. And so hopefully we can talk about some of these nuances of there isn't just like things you can grab off the shelf and just put in a little shape and say, okay, toxicity is solved. I don't believe that to be the case because toxicity is highly complex, highly variable from scale 1 all the way up to scale 10. And I think that it requires more of I want to say it, a lifestyle choice rather than just a bunch of little tools on the shelf. We all need tools, but ultimately I think it requires you as a person to truly believe that you can do good in this world.
On that as well, by the way, you're talking about scales, which is interesting. It got me thinking about your yardstick. So what are you using for your yardstick to measure toxicity? Because that person in front of you in the flight didn't think he was being toxic. In his world, he wasn't being toxic. So you've decided that's toxic. I mean, we're probably all in agreement that's toxic. But what yardstick are you using to measure that? I would put out there.
I agree. And that guy was in the right. He'd bought a smoking seat and he was sitting in it and he was getting after it. And I'm good with that. I am good with that. I mean, he's probably dead by now from cancer, but whatever, man. And so, I mean, that's a terrible thing to say, but that is the truth. The way that guy was pounding cigarettes, that is going backwards, not forwards. Even though the plane was going forwards, he was not, in my opinion. And so it's not my job to tell him, dude, those are coffin nails. That is not my job. And it's not my job to reach over, tap him on the shoulder and say, hey, man, can you stop smoking in the smoking section? Because that would have been uncool. So my only option at that point was not to berate him, not to lecture him, not to inform him, not to do anything with that guy. Because as far as I was concerned, he was in the right place to do what he wanted to do. It was the system as a whole that I felt was broken or flawed or incorrect in this moment. I'm in a tube in space, trapped in the non-smoking smoking section. And so there has to be something solved in that equation. And for me, it was a letter, but it wasn't being a goof to the guy in front of me. You know, I wasn't kicking his chair or getting irritated by him. I was just irritated by the system that had a label on it called non-smoking, when in effect, that is like a lot of rooms in our lives. The label says we're cool, but you walk in and it isn't cool. It says non-smoking, but everyone's smoking. And so labels and all these various things are a big part of this conversation, I feel.
So then would you say that your yardstick in that situation was your expression of agency and that personal autonomy and acting in a way that was both respectful but lets you feel control of that environment for just that moment?
That's a great question. Here's how I approach that situation, and this is how I approach it throughout my entire life. I'm there to try to manage Sean, but I'm also there more correctly and a greater percentage of me being there to like learn and be helpful for others. So I could have complained during that entire flight, but that wouldn't have helped the person who's getting on the plane 10 years from now or the next day. And so our solo journey through the world, if our only ownership in these moments is me, then it's a pretty shallow sort of yardstick, I think. But if your yardstick is actually, how can I improve this toxic situation for myself and all those around me, not just in this very moment, but tomorrow and a year from now kind of thing? That's kind of how I've run my life for a long time. I don't know if it's the right yardstick, but it makes me feel like I've got not a non-reactive stance. I react in the moment, but I'm reacting through the lens of how can I improve the world behind me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely so.
I have a thought on this. Well, a thought and a question, because to what you're talking about, I think, Sean, is the you're set on action rather than outcome, right? This is where most people, I think, have difficulties with toxic situations, is that if I go into a toxic scenario similar to you, I'm in the plane, the guy's smoking, I don't want this to happen. I want an outcome change right now of this toxic situation right now. I want the outcome changed. But the outcome really is that you just have to sit there and take it. The action, the agency that you're taking is to hold some sort of accountability within yourself. I need to do something, but that doesn't change the outcome of what's happening right now. And I'm digging this because earlier you had said something about having the right tools, not just a shelf full of tools, but like a lifestyle change. And what it reminded me of is the difference between a carpenter versus a handyman. Because I got a wall full of tools and I know how to use all of them. And all that good stuff, I can pull those out at any point in time and I can do different jobs with them, et cetera, et cetera. But if I was a carpenter, I would have a workshop. I would have my lifestyle would be built around that. Similarly to ranchers who live out on the land, their lifestyle is built around that. Or jiu-jitsu studio owners, like their lifestyle is built around the ownership of that studio, that kind of thing, where all of your actions and thought patterns are based around the survival of that particular environment. So I'm wondering, do you think that has to do with it? Like just having the tools to do the job versus living the lifestyle that the tools require to kind of build out of a toxic environment? What do you guys think? Sean, I'm going to come to you first on this one. What do you think?
Okay, I'm not going to hog the mic because I feel like I've already done too much talking at this point. So I will say this, that, using the carpenter example or the handyman example, I'm a handyman. I'm not a subject matter expert in anything. I don't think of myself as a carpenter in anything. I'm just like a handyman. But like any handyman moving through life, I pick up tools and I hold them and I'll bang them against something, think that's not for me. And I put it down and along my way, I find other tools. All the tools that I own are tools that work for me. However, I believe there's a lot of commonality from the tools that I use and Sam uses and Sara uses and you use, Chance. I think there's, what's the overlap? 90+% of commonality on the tools that we are currently using as good people. But, the devil is in the details, as they say. And so can you get 91%? Can you get 93%? Can you get 97%? Can you lose your way by trying to get 98% of all the tools? And I think you can. And so my point is going to be this, that whether you're a carpenter or a handyman, whether you're Red Seal qualified or not, doesn't matter to me. All you need to do is show up and do your best. Do your best. And you'll either do it right or you'll do it wrong. And if you're doing your best, you'll learn. And that's the way it is. The iteration of trying hard, screwing it up, learn how to do it better, apologize to everyone, get on with the program, and keep evolving, keep becoming a better person. That's what I believe in. So the hammer, the nail, the screwdriver, the ruler, all of these things, they are great tools. But I don't fixate on the tools per se. I try to keep an extremely open mind that is almost devoid of tools. I try to feel the moment. I try to be a good person. I try to help others behind me. And I just keep punching forward. I hope that answers your question.
Bam. Love it. Sara, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm of that mindset as well. To me, the lifestyle is the tool per se. It's every day is so different, every person is so different, and to try to every single time try to find a tool or a series of 5 tools that makes that situation better would make me crazy. But something that is repeatable and sustainable every day for me is to adopt a lifestyle that is one of personal accountability and ownership to a very extreme level, and to be a good person, whether that's holding the door at a bakery or like praising the kids for doing something right, even when I'm really mad at them because they just destroyed the house. It doesn't really matter. But at the end of the day, it's just doing the best you can every day. And that's really it, because tomorrow might be a really bad day, but if you tried your best, then you get a do-over hopefully in the morning, and you just go on about it.
Hopefully. Hopefully
Yeah.
we get a do-over in the morning. Unfortunately, sometimes we don't. Just a quick interject here. I just want to jump on this. Ellen Shabaro jumped in here saying, hey, buddy, what's up, buddy? It's been a while. We got to talk to you again soon. Lisa Meyer jumped in here, said, catching you live. Hello and happy Friday, everyone. Good to see you, Lisa. And Spartan Wellness, great chat, guys. Great information. Good to see you all. If you guys have any thoughts, questions, hit us up throughout the show. By all means, hit us up. Sam, you got any thoughts on any of this?
Reiterating what's already been said, really, it's about living in your values, living in what you believe. What changes is the environment. So going back to Sean's analogy with the smoking, and he was right. That guy had every right to smoke because he paid for a smoking seat. So what right do you have to come into that environment and say, why are you smoking? Well, I'm in the smoking area. That's why I'm smoking. So what right do you have? So he did what was in his control in that situation. Where if someone walked into Sean's house and sparked up a cigarette, I'm sure his response would be very different, and it wouldn't be waiting for them to leave and write a letter about, smoking in his house. So, the environment changes. So, if someone comes into my environment, maybe I'll let them know if they're living outside of my values and belief systems in my household. But if I've walked into their environment, then you have to respect their environment as well. But what's important is that you don't compromise who you are. You've still got to live in what you believe. That's super important. For example, going back to that smoking analogy, that guy smoking could have been sat next to his child. And that child could have been looking at him going, you look really unhealthy. And then he could have been looking at Sean going, what's the difference between those two? Oh, well, he's not smoking and he looks really healthy. Maybe I'm going to follow that guy's example, So we should always remember that we're always a role model. We're always an example. We're always being an influence to someone. Sometimes it's a healthy one and sometimes it's an unhealthy one. So it's really important to be super conscious in how we're walking our walk.
So, Sam, I'd never thought of it that way. I'd never, ever, because I couldn't even see it. There may have been a kid there. I don't know, but they were super small if they were. And so, but it, metaphorically speaking, having that sort of angle on it, I really love that, man. So that has actually changed the moment for me to some degree. Not magnificently, but, thank you for that. And so it is kind of key, as you said, that ideals or values or who you are at your center, who you are at your core, what you believe you are, how you identify yourself, the label that you give yourself day after day or week after week. Does that change? And the idea that if I walk into Sam's house, do I adapt to him or does he adapt to me? All of these things are like great questions. And they are kind of central to the human existence. If I can't get along with Sam, but he can get along with me, that's a different relationship over time. It could go in many different ways and then invert that, or we both get along famously, or we both repel each other. All of these moments in life, toxic, we'll call it, or not, they're just opportunities to learn how to get along with others. But they're also opportunities for you to re-engage or get back in touch with who you are at your core. As Sam said, if I walked into his house and I was acting out and it wasn't at all in alignment with his values or who he is as a person or what he feels is the way life should unfold in his house, I would hope that with his personal agency, he would find a way, and I'm sure he would do it cool. He would say, hey, I got to have a word with you. He wouldn't see me spark up a cigarette and throw a glass of orange juice at me or anything crazy like that. He would find a cool way to enter into that conversation. I believe that because people who've lived a well-engaged life, people who have traveled, people who've seen a thing or two, people who've made mistakes and learned from them, generally speaking, are fairly grounded and fairly rational and are fairly tooled up to be able to enter into that moment and feel it out and shape it in a way that there's a positive outcome for both parties. Now, that's not always the way. It's not always the case. But the more three-dimensional of a human that you are, the more three-dimensional the outcomes are. It's not just simply binary of smoker, get out, or smoker, stay. It's a more well-rounded, a more, not opportunistic, but a more sensitive application of what's right in the moment. Not maybe even for everyone involved, but it certainly has to be right for you to some degree. Now, what that percentage of right is, like, it shouldn't have to be all 100% for Sean. It's got to be right for Sean all the time, obviously. But in the walking into Sam's house and lighting up a cigarette scenario, 99% of it, Sam has to, I believe, feel that, like, there's no way I can get away with that in his house. And then he's got to figure out the other 1% that is me, or the 2% that is me, or 3. He has to find a way to do it the right way, not just any way. I hope that makes sense.
And the two things I'd say that combat that is, one, approaching every situation with love. And the second one is approaching it with curiosity. Why did Sean come in and do that in my house? I wonder why he did that. What's going on in Sean's life? You know, if you approach it with those two things, you'll probably respond to it in a healthy way.
I love that.
So this brings up a thought in my mind, is the difference between compliance versus adoption. So, like, I was thinking of Sean, when you were in Japan a couple years ago now, I think, right? You were staying at an inn. You have pictures of you in a kimono. You were like in the culture. You were complying with everything, but it also reminded me of, like, you got to take your shoes off before you step on any of the interior surfaces, right? And my wife and I were having this conversation a little bit ago about people who wear their shoes inside their house. It seems odd, but to us, we always take our shoes.
Did Chance lock up?
Yeah,
I think
I
that
thought
was-
we'd all gone there, but it's.
I know that.
I thought it was me.
Let me take over. So since he was talking about the Japanese, the scenario that he was describing, that was up at the Nakasendo Trail, which is a very famous rural area of Japan where the samurai used to historically move back and forth from the capital out into the mountainside areas and etc. And so we were staying at a little ryokan, and the ryokan didn't demand, but they strongly recommended that we shift into traditional attire. And so, like, I didn't feel good about that, to be honest. It's not that I was uncomfortable putting it on, because I mean, I think it's cool. I think it's great. Everything about it I thought was awesome, except there's this thing that had been going on for a while of cultural appropriation, where, you know, it's a bit of a buzzword that me as a Canadian shouldn't wear traditional Japanese attire and get all my photos taken and pretending like I'm a samurai, because that's offensive to the country of Japan. That's an entirely different conversation. But as complex as that conversation is, in the moment, I felt like, I don't know if I want to do this, because I don't want anyone to assume that I'm not sensitive to all of this subject. I just didn't want anyone to think that I was callously or thoughtlessly shifting into kimono mode and just getting all the photos. It felt really awkward to me, but I still put it on. I still tried to own the moment, relax in it, and all of that good stuff. And it was great. I have no regrets, but it does raise the topic of, if I would have just said no, it would have made the Ryokan's hosts, or the owners, the old man who bowed and said, "Welcome to the Ryokan," it would have made him feel uncomfortable. And so that goes back to the Alitalia flight. I'll accept uncomfortable moments, but usually what will move my needle is if I feel like the person behind me a day later, a week later, or a year later is also going to have to face the same uncomfortableness. And if there's a way that I can make their life a bit easier, then I'm going to engage in that. And so when I changed into the traditional attire, a couple of photos up on the Instagrams, well, hopefully it made someone else out there feel like more comfortable with the idea that if they do go to Japan and do shift into that sort of mode, it's not only acceptable, it's for them to decide what it means to them rather than what the current world says is cultural appropriation. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I make sense, but I think what is so important about that story is that that person asked you to observe their culture in that way, to be part of it, to enjoy it. And I mean, to me, maybe it would have been disrespectful if at that point then you had done something flashier, like look at me in this very traditional attire, but to just be there and be part of it and be one with the group, I think is arguably one of the most respectful things you could have done to that person and to that group of people who are all there with you.
Sorry about that, everybody. I don't know what happened there, but I appreciate you guys carrying on the conversation without me. And that is what I wanted to actually touch on, is the fact that when you adopt a certain, a different person's method of living, perhaps, depending on what it is, versus smoking versus not, shoes in the house versus not, or taking on a traditional cultural value or dress in a certain area, the issue would then be, what happens if you take it home? What happens if you try it once, you're like, I'm going to wear a kimono in this particular place, and then I'm going to fly home and I'm going to buy 17 of them and I'm going to wear them every single day. I'm going to walk around in them in an inauthentic manner. So I think this is fantastic. I'm glad you guys were able to catch that from, I don't know how much you actually got from what I was saying. Sam, you got any thoughts on any of this?
My very short thought on this is as long as it doesn't compromise your belief system. Boundaries are important. Be able to express your boundaries, but as long as it's not compromising your belief system, then yeah, when you're in a culture, you should most definitely respect their culture and where you can embrace it, as long as it's not compromising what you believe in.
So I don't mind, that on the show, and I'm going to preface this. I'm going to give our 4 rules now, because it's been a while since we threw that out. We've got 4 rules on the show: no race, religion, politics, and no swearing. And there's reasons for that. So now I'm going to edge towards maybe a little bit of a political moment in the past. And it was actually our previous prime minister, Trudeau. And he was in a moment where he was dressed in cultural attire from India. And the moment, to me and to most Canadians, by the way, just felt like really staged and really inauthentic. And it was less about him being, now this is just my perspective and many others, it was less about him being there to represent Canada or to interact with the parties in front of him or just be cool. What he did do in that moment, and maybe he only did it once in his life, it doesn't matter, that's not important. In this one moment, what he did do was he made it all about him. And it was not received well here in Canada. And that was some time ago. And it's still raised as a sort of a thorn in everyone's side of, you're on the world stage representing your country and you made it all about you instead of all about everyone who is in front of you. You're actually in that moment, in whatever attire you're in, you're a vessel representing something that you should understand other than just yourself. Like, none of us just represent us. We represent everyone who's been involved in our lives, everyone who's taught us lessons, everyone who raised us. And I don't mean just as kids, I mean as grown adults. We've all been raised throughout the various phases of our life by mentors or leaders or seniors or whatever the case is. And so I don't feel like I just represent Sean. I represent all the good people, tens of thousands of people that I've met in my life who are cool and who have tried their hardest to not be toxic or to do it right. And so that moment stands out to me as a pretty good example of how a single individual can toxify almost an entire country or the entire world when they make it about themselves.
So you're saying he went over there as an ambassador for Canada, and would you say he compromised himself? Are you saying is that your challenge there?
That is not only my interpretation, but I do believe it's the interpretation of pretty much every man, woman, and child in Canada. I don't know, Chance, maybe as another Canadian, you can throw in your 2 cents.
I would agree. As a representative of the country of Canada, especially as a prime minister, yeah, absolutely. You're putting yourself on the world stage for the nation, not yourself. That's the idea of service, though. That's it's a public service to be in those situations. So this kind of touches on something I want to go into. Sarah, you got some thoughts before I jump in on this?
I have some thoughts, but I want to hear your question first.
Okay. Earlier, Sean, you had talked about labels. And something clicked in my head here was that when we first joined the military, you guys probably got this spiel as well as I did. It was, hey, if you're going to go into town, go have fun. Don't do anything stupid, because if you do, you get arrested or whatever. In the newspapers tomorrow, it's going to say Canadian Forces soldier ... did whatever, not Chance Burles. And we got briefed on this many, many times, in the fact that it doesn't matter what you do now. You're a part of this organization, and you are an ambassador for this organization. So that means you have to adopt the role for that organization. And I kind of wonder about this, and the fact that the labels that we attach to ourselves, but also the labels that other people attach to us, will become how we're viewed through, like the lens that we're viewed through all the time. So Sarah, for instance, you have friends that perhaps only know you as a mother, and therefore that lens that they look at you, whether you are being toxic or not, is going to be viewed through that lens. Versus Sam, some people only know you as a soldier. Therefore, some people are going to look at you through the lens, therefore, of as a soldier, of what they see a soldier is. So toxicity also really has to do with the lens that we're looking at each other through at the time, as well as all these other pieces to it. And I find this really fascinating. So, Sarah, any thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that lens holds a lot of relevance when we talk about toxicity. And I would really like to share just an anecdote about it. And I may have told you guys this before, but I have a best friend here, and she also works with Weedify, and we do jujitsu together and all of these different things. Well, we did a class together on femininity and different feminine archetypes. And we're very different. To her, she views me, as my time in the military, being a very active jujitsu competitor, always pursuing very challenging things. And she asked me one day if, because she was more, stereotypically feminine, if I thought she was weak, or if I looked down on her because we demonstrated femininity in different ways. And that really touched me and changed me in a way that I realized that sometimes how I present myself, even though I have the best intentions and do feel secure in myself and my values, can make other people feel small sometimes. And to me, that's very toxic. And I had to look at that and be like, even though I don't think I'm doing anything wrong, or that she's doing anything wrong, how can I change my own behavior and how I present myself to be more inclusive to the people I want to be. I still don't think that everybody has the right to have access to everybody, but those people that we love and we care about, like how do we do better to lift them up and adjust focus in the presence of those lenses.
Interesting. Sam, you got any thoughts on any of this?
That was a great point, and showed growth mindset there, and just being aware of our lenses and how we can come across sometimes. Not necessarily that's what we believe, but maybe that's how we've come across, or maybe that's how we've been perceived is a massive thing, which goes back to kind of one of my starting points was what is, one of the things that's toxic is poor communication, isn't it? So sometimes we need to have that safe place to be able to talk more. But going back to what you're talking about with when you join the military and when we all join the military, well, that then becomes your identity. That's what you're talking about. And once you hold that identity, we're now an ambassador for that identity as well. So, we're all Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu people here. Maybe I've retired for 18 months, so maybe I can't call myself that anymore. But, when I was competing, I represented the club that I was competed for. So I'm an ambassador for that club. So if I go and I show bad etiquette on the mat, then who does that hurt? That actually hurts who I'm representing as well, because I'm being an ambassador for that club. So again, it comes back to knowing what your identity is and what you're holding that in, and then are you being a good ambassador for that identity? And again, sometimes we fall short, and we have to learn, and we have to grow.
Absolutely. Sean, you got any thoughts?
I do. One of the interesting things as you were relaying that, Sarah, is I was considering why she thought that, of course. And it's not hard to understand, given that the typical stereotype or the kind of framework that most military, certainly maybe combat arms or someone who is a little more in a more aggressive career within the military, that intensity of the military individual who has a role that is quite dynamic or has a lot of pressure or a lot of intensity involved in it tends to develop intensity in the individual, tends to develop intensity across the organization. And so if we contextualize or compare a military role against a civilian role, I think it's fairly easy to say that as a generalization, that the military role tends to have more intensity involved in it. And therefore it becomes who we are. We're surrounded by it. We have to deploy it. We are intense individuals. It becomes normalized. And then when we get out of the military, we've got all of this intensity. We're used to being in it. We're used to deploying it. We feel comfortable in it. We quite like it. And so now people are viewing us not only as who we are standing in front of them as radiating intensity, but the overarching theme that's hanging over our head is, and they are from the military, which is a really intense organization, and everybody in it is really masculine, not feminine, as it were. And that's a loose statement. And so I think that, there's a couple of things going on there. And maybe it was less about who you are, Sarah, and more about the organizational labels of people who are in these sort of career paths. So it is interesting, though, what your takeaway was in the moment. Like, what did you feel in the moment? Did you quickly categorize it through all of the tools that you've got? Did you take a tactical pause in the liminal space between her saying it and you about to respond? Did you hold that space and run a few iterations to see what that all meant? Or did you not say anything? Or how did you manage that?
Yeah, so in that situation, that was one of those times where I really had to take a pause. I am a very intense person. I like intense activity. I actually feel very unhealthy if I don't have some sort of intensity outlet. I guess what anecdotally kind of like fire, like I need that energy. That's what feels good to me. And so again, it's not something where I felt I was in the wrong or that she was wrong for saying so, but I took that pause to consider why she might ask that. Was it related to insecurities? Was it related to how I treated her? And what I ultimately came to was, you know, we're both fine in our own journeys, but because we are such good friends, it's my personal responsibility as a custodian of a mutually reciprocating friendship to provide a level of love and, in a sense, validation that continues to foster that really positive relationship because it's something that's important to me. And in doing that, it lets me stay true to myself, stay true to those values, and still maintain ownership, and to where maybe a more unhealthy me would have had a much more drastic or antagonistic response.
That response is something I kind of want to touch on here because there's two sides to the same coin in terms of toxicity here too, because you could go to the one side of this, which is, how dare you? You don't get to tell me how to live my life. I'm going to beat, and you just aggressive right back at it, smash into that wall and try and dominate the conversation. But the other side of it is, I also see this as semi-toxic, is to just completely acquiesce and be like, "Oh no, you're right. I should dim down for you." So, and I kind of want to explore the two sides of this. Obviously, there's nuance in between. It's not one or the other, but the ability to communicate with your friends and the people that you love, and the people that are in your life, and being able to kind of manage in between those two extremes is really important. But it can't be done for everybody, because then we're just at the whim of everybody else's feelings in any moment. So I want to dive into this a little bit. Sarah, I'm going to come to you right back. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that there's a really fine line between compromising and communication in a healthy relationship and pleasing, right? Or the opposite side of just complete, like shutting down, or, some sort of explosive or, high energy response. But to Sam's point, really, it's if you're true to yourself, both can be true. You can be firm in your boundaries and firm in how you present yourself as a person, but still see that person's point of view and appreciate their point. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to change or do anything different, or that I would expect them to do anything different, because I think that that expectation would be really cruel, because that would just suggest an entitlement on my point that I would hold in that relationship. And ultimately, a lot of times what I will ask myself is, do I feel owed something in this situation? Because a lot of times I really am of the point that, we're not owed anything. We can work hard, and I do think hard work is rewarded, but it doesn't mean that it's always going to happen that way.
That's a beautiful point. Sam, you got anything to add?
I think that's all great points. It's just also, again, recognizing where's that voice coming from? Does that person lack self-esteem? So that's coming out on you now, on the way you choose to live your life. But, I think if anyone's going to speak into your life, if somebody speaks into my life, I will always have a self-reflection on that. Is that true? Can I learn from that? Can I take that on board and sit with that? And sometimes it will cause an action to change, and sometimes I go, no, I'm actually okay in this. I think that's more of a them issue. And now let's either we create a safe space for vulnerability and for communication and talk, or sometimes we just need to leave that one be and crack on our merry way.
Sometimes that safe space that you're talking about is a good arm's length, right? Sometimes it's just over there rather than right in front of you. Sean, you got any thoughts on this?
This morning, I just finished off over 10,000 words in a chapter on this specific subject, this subject alone. And so I do have a few thoughts, but I'm going to try to limit them.
One or two.
And so I'm going to take it back to, maybe I'll step phase this. So Chance, you brought up the idea of intensity or aggression, as it were. And so I got no problems with intensity and aggression. I really don't. As a word or as an idea, it's how it's deployed, it's how it's used, it's how it's understood by the person. And so I consider intensity or aggression as a fuel to drive your life. I mean, if you want to have some drive, if you want to like get things accomplished in your young life, you need some aggression to get things done. It can be a really positive aggression. It can be a really positive intensity. But you can also turn that to the dark side. So you've got like the good side of the force and the bad side of the force. And that's just a simple generalization of all of the things that we have inside of us, the intensity, that's for us to use to our benefit or not. And it's also to be used for the benefit of everyone around you or not. So every time you're stepping into these moments of it requires a certain amount of intensity or aggression, those things are neutral. It's how you shape them. You can either take them to the good or to the bad. And that's just a fundamental understanding of emotions. All emotions aren't necessarily good or bad. It's you that makes them good or bad to some degree. And again, that's a very gross generalization. So I don't want anyone out there to think that, however Sara and her friend's conversation went down, whether there was intensity or aggression or not, it doesn't much matter. Whatever was going on between the two of them, there would have been some emotions in there, no doubt. And it might have been Sara, like initially within a split second thinking, what the heck is even going on here right now? And that what the heck is, in a sense, its form of kind of a defensive shield. Wham! What the heck is going on here? Whook, out comes the sword. That's how it can go. Or if you're very centered and grounded, you can stand in front of the person and think, interesting. I've got to take a moment here before I send my next sentence out into the world. There's many ways to play that. And it kind of sounds to me like Sara did it right if she stepped away and took some time and thought about it. Well, here we are today, learning from that moment. We don't need to know the ins and outs of what happened, per se. All we need is the lessons, the wisdom of these things. And so whether that happened yesterday or 1 billion years ago, to me is inconsequential. What is important is what Sara comes away from it with and what I learned from Sara's wisdom. That's what I think is important in these kind of things.
I think we should go around again on this. I'm going to come back to Sam. We're going to go around again. Any thoughts on what Sean just put down?
No, all I was thinking is when we're talking there, it's just approaching situations with love. That's what's going on in my mind. We just need to approach people with love. We don't need to agree with everyone. That's okay. We've all got our own values and we have this expectation that everyone should live in our values, but we just need to treat everyone with love. That's all that was going through my head there.
Love it. Sara, any thoughts?
No, I completely agree with Sam. I think that what it really boiled down to was just approaching it with love and actually approaching most situations with love is what has really helped change my perspective for the better in a lot of ways in the last several years.
I'm really digging this conversation, and I just want to hit this comment real quick here, and then we can move on. I got another question for y'all. But Dan C jumped in and said, "My career was quite tumultuous, but my integrity was never questioned. Didn't make me rich in money, rank, or prestige, but it made my heart feel right." And I think this is an interesting point because the ability to stand behind your actions in the fact that it made your heart feel right. So even if at some times we have been toxic in the past, I know I have for sure. Even with my wife, we've had multiple conversations and multiple head bashing moments for sure. But we were just discussing this the other day in the fact that had we still been within our own toxic families and within our own groupings and of people that were still very with self-centered perhaps, we probably wouldn't be together still because we wouldn't have had to communicate to each other. We wouldn't have had to work out the actual problems. We would be able to go back to our little echo chambers and be like, well, she said that and he did this and it allows, by being able to completely separate and then speak within an echo chamber, isn't going to make our heart feel right. But to actually sit down and discuss the issues directly and come at it from a position of love, as you guys are saying, I think it's a great point. Now, before I jump into another question here, any thoughts on any of that? Sean, I'm going to hit you first. What do you got?
Can you throw up Dan C's comment again, please?
Bang.
Because what caught my eye was, but my integrity was never questioned. Well, lucky you. You know, what if it was? What if most of your career, your integrity had been questioned? What if you were only half a career in and all of a sudden you're like the scapegoat for something where your integrity is maximum questioned? So when I say lucky you, that was probably not luck. I'm sure Dancy had something to do with that. But life can be a bit chaotic. So as tumultuous as his career was, his integrity could have also been questioned. And then what? What are the tools that you fall back on? And as he said, he can't fall back on money, rank, or prestige. He's falling back on his heart, which felt right to him. But now with the question of his integrity being questioned, would his heart have been strong enough, and I'm using that term loosely, to have withstood or to have stood his ground and felt good about who he is as a person, or good that the system is beating him down given that they're questioning his integrity? And so in the worst case, where it was tumultuous and the entire system was lined up against your integrity, now what? Well, as he said, it's about your heart. It's about your soul. It's about who you are as a person. It's what your center is. It's how you're grounded. There's many words. It's your beliefs. It's your values. It's, for Sam, I know that it is his religion, or his faith, I should call it. And so we've all got our own versions of faith, I believe. Faith in ourselves, faith in our family, faith in our friends, faith in our dog, faith in our neighbor, faith in our car. There's faith in a lot of things. But the central faiths, our strongest pillar of faith, is something that isn't often thought enough about. Because eventually life can stack up against you where you are tested to a degree where everything's being questioned. What do you fall back on? What would have Dan fell back on? And that's a rhetorical question, of course. So maybe he wasn't fully tested. I'm sure he was tested a lot. Maybe he wasn't fully tested enough for him to have an extremely clear understanding of what is important to Dan C, you know?
Sam, what do you got?
I love how Sean's brain works and where it goes. Because that's a really great point what he's talking about. There's a big difference between having your integrity questioned and being integral. You could not be integral and never get your integrity questioned, you know? You just might never get picked up for it. So that's a really key point, you know, and yeah, you'll sleep better at night if you're living in that integrity, and not just in one environment, in every environment of your life. And that's why it's important of when we know who we are, that I'm the same Sam sat here talking to you on here. And then when I step outside my front door, I'm the same Sam. And then the same Sam with my daughter, I'm the same Sam in different environments. That's super, super important to be who we are in all those environments. And then just jumping back to what you said, Chance, about that kind of arguments with or discussions with your partner. And it's always just remembering, I think where people fail is that arguments, once you start thinking about winning an argument, you've already lost. That's no longer a discussion. We're now trying to win something. So, you know, the confrontation is really healthy, but you need to do it in a really safe environment, and allow one another to speak and stop trying to win. I think the key to relationships is actually putting others first. You know, especially if you're married, your wife and your children should come before you. You're there to serve them. So if you approach it with that heart, you'll probably do all right. Once self-centeredness gets in, once selfish gets in, once self gets in, now we're in trouble. So just, that's my point on that.
I'm liking it. Sarah, you got any thoughts? No? All right, well, I'm going to jump right into this because I had a thought on that, because I think there is a point where, and this is for myself that I had to take in, was the fact that what I still need to do things for myself. So I can't fully serve others without fully serving myself. Like jujitsu, like the podcast, like construction on my basement, that kind of thing. Is that in order for me to do all these things, I have to be healthy so that I can show up as the best person for my family, for my wife and my kids. And if I don't do those things, then I am not showing up as my best person, which then leads to bad choices and leads to not the right amount of sleep, which leads to aggression, which leads to me yelling at my kids because they're being kids, that kind of stuff. So I think there is, if your mindset is set on the service to your family, absolutely. But there also has to be a little bit of give and take on that, because I still have to serve my own needs so that I can serve them to the best of my ability. Sarah, you got any thoughts on this?
Yes, definitely. So I think really when you are saying that you are serving yourself, you very much are still serving your family. Where it gets convoluted is, are we doing these things to feel something that's more egocentric, or are we doing them to maintain our sense of balance and that grounding so that we do show up as our best selves? Because I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I would comfortably guess that all of us in this conversation have something that keeps us healthy, where we have an energy expenditure, that helps us stay grounded, or whether it's, a meditation or reflection, some sort of activity that we really need to do for ourselves to show up as the best person for, our kids, our spouse, or whoever. But I think that the delineation again is, are we doing this, out of a strong sense of ego, or just because we know it's what we need to do to stay healthy?
Sam, any thoughts?
Yeah, very much along those same lines. I understand what you're saying, Chance, as well. However, I think we can make excuses as well. So I think we can do these things to be at our peak. So, exercise for me is really important. That's going to be something I want to do 6 to 7 days a week, because that will help me perform at my best and to be able to give it my best. However, when we have children, loved ones, there's always a sacrifice. So you need to be willing to sacrifice some of those things that we enjoy doing in order to give. There's always a give and take there. There's always a balance, and so there should be. I also have a concern for people, a growing concern, that people's mental fitness is like hung on to their physical fitness. And I see these people killing themselves in the gym and going, I need this for my mental fitness. And that really concerns me, because what if your physical health got took from you today? Does that now mean that your mental health will suffer? I'm not saying it would be easy, but you should definitely, going back to tools that Sean brought up or you brought up before, you should have tools in your toolbox in order for your mental fitness still to be okay if that was to be taken away from you. Yes, you're going to operate at a higher level. If we can look after our sleep, we can look after our nutrition, we can look after our physical health, our emotional health, our spiritual health, we look at all those things. But we also need to be aware that, our physical health can be snatched away from us. And if we say, I love doing an exercise with people going, what are your values? And everyone likes saying, integrity is mine. And I like saying family's theirs. And then I'll go, okay, so what'd you do last night? Well, I drove an hour and a half to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for 2 hours. Then I drove an hour and a half back home. And I'm like, okay, so how much time did you spend with your family last night? Oh, well, I didn't, because by the time I got back there in bed, I was like, okay, so where's the prioritization there? Okay, maybe you do that 2-3 nights a week. But if you were doing that every night and then you're telling me that your kids come first, but then you never see your kids because if you don't do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, your mental health's going to suffer. I'm like, well, hold on here. There needs to be something looked at. So again, it's going back, Sarah was using the term ego there, that I look at that like, be really honest with yourself sometimes. Am I doing this just solely for me because I want to do it? Or am I doing it because it makes me a better person? Sometimes it's both. Sometimes it's not. So honest reflection there. So we need to be honest there. And sometimes we use these things as excuses, with a spouse and that going, well, if I don't do this, I'm not going to be my best self. And almost that's like an abuse of it almost. So yeah, that's my
100%.
thoughts?
100%. And I hear this all the time. You know, the gym is my therapy, or the mats are my therapy, or the whatever is ... You can put anything in there, versus just doing the therapy. The funny thing is, we were talking about this before the show, Sam, is that like I threw my back out yesterday because I had a plumbing / electrical emergency that I needed to sort out immediately. And so I didn't get a clip out. I didn't get my my fancy dancy intro video that I normally do, trailers for these shows, because I was working overhead trying to fix an electrical problem, as well as then do a bunch of plumbing because it needed to be done. That became the priority. My family and my home. That is my priority over anything else. I didn't go to jiu-jitsu. I didn't do all the things that I would normally do on a Thursday because that became the priority. And I think that's a fantastic point. Sean, you got any thoughts on any of this?
I do. So right now, you just saved me from hitting you up after the show saying, where was the clips?
Yeah.
So with that said, I think that what we're really talking about now is a holistic balance or a holistic approach to your lifestyle. And I think probably, well, I know I've been guilty of saying, hey, listen, if I don't get this done, then I'm not going to be a good dad in that next moment. And so these are easy labels to adopt briefly, momentarily, so that you understand that that was a dumb label. I'm going to get rid of that. That doesn't serve my family well. It doesn't serve me well. It doesn't serve the world well. So I'm ditching that dumb idea. And so, but it's easy to slide into it. The trick is sliding out of it and then staying out of it. That's the trick. And you may slide in and out of it throughout different phases of your life until, bam, you get that realization again of, oh man, that little slippery trap that I just slid into, I'm out of there. And so you have to, these kind of things are not one and doneers. You can't just, enter into a problem, realize the trap, step out of it and think, that'll never happen again. Guaranteed it's going to happen again. It may just happen a little less, or you may have a little bit of more clarity the next time. But the world, our lives that are wrapped around us are designed to test us. And so you're failing the test if you don't realize that you're writing a test. And so I think that I have fallen into that trap and I have stepped in and out of it a number of times. And at this point, I feel that I've got a reasonably good balance in the sense of I don't say I need to get on the BJJ mats. What I will say is I would like to. I want to. It'd be nice if I could. I'd prefer to. These are softer words. I know that might not help anyone out there, but that softening of the demands of the world, where you realize that you're interacting with the world, not that you own the world. The softening of your language can really improve your life, I believe. And so I want to get a ride in later today. And I don't need a ride. I would like to get a ride in. I don't think any of us really need anything when it comes to BJJ or running or riding for the rest of our lives. No one right now can scribble down on a piece of paper that I need to ride a bike for the rest of my life. 3 years from now, I might fall out of love with riding. I might lose my passion for riding. Something else might catch my eye, and I will need to redirect my time towards that. And so the moment that you lock your mind into, I need this trajectory forever, that's the moment that you stop being a growth mindset. That's the moment you stop being a student of life. And so it's a really important consideration that your day should unfold organically and naturally without a whole bunch of tension. And you should be able to sit in it or walk in it or stand in it and have a calm presence, a calm tone in your voice. You should feel grounded to others around you. In essence, you should be that room that you want to walk into and feel, this is a cool room. That's kind of how you got to be in the moment for the bulk of your life. And so if we're talking about wants and needs of BJJ, if if you want or need anything, but as you're saying it, you're chaotic and ungrounded and your tone is wrong and your fists are clenched and your pulse is racing, your pupils are dilated and you're looking like you're about to have a car crash, then the wants and needs are not about BJJ. They're much deeper than that. And so I feel like these kind of conversations are great. The spirit of I want and need BJJ. But really what we're talking about is that's a proxy for a much deeper rooted conversation, which is who are you as a person as you're wanting and needing things? Are you grounded? Are you chill? Or is your pulse racing and your mouth dry and you're sweating and you don't know why? Make sense?
I'm definitely tracking. Alan Shabaro jumped in here. I get to. And that was a great line. I get to do this. This is fantastic. Sara, you got any thoughts on what Sean just dropped?
Yeah, I think that distinction is really important. And it's not to diminish intensity or the different things that we bring to the table or put into our daily life. But I mean, really, like the only thing I need to do is keep breathing. Like, I would like to do X, Y, or Z in my day is what I get to do. To Alan's point, each task that I get to do outside of what my daily plan was, that's just bonus. But if we're like, I need to do this, then I completely agree that it's something probably deeper that we're trying to fulfill that really is not going to be touched by BJJ or whatever the thing is that we think we need in that moment.
That is a beautiful point. And as you said that, it made me think of advocacy. That was one of the big ones for me. It was like, I have to help my brothers. I have to help this person. I have to have my phone on at 2:00 in the morning so that people can call me, whatever. Like, I felt there was a need there that I didn't understand at the time, that I was trying to fulfill without understanding what it was I was trying to fulfill. But the concept of just the need portion of this is fantastic. And I have a question.
What was the deeper reason that you felt compelled? Because I know back then we've talked about it, and this is not for me, obviously. This is for people who are tuning in today or years from now. And so, and obviously I'm not putting you on the spot because I already know what your answer generally will be, but what were you thinking back then versus how you understand it now?
So back then, I felt like I hadn't done enough. That was the big one, was that I hadn't served to my greatest capacity. I felt like I had, what was the word I used a while ago? I had kind of laxed my way through the system in my time in the military. So I felt like I still had to put out in order to live up to what I thought I had done. Versus now, I much better understand what it truly was, is that I had no sense of purpose after I left, and I was trying to use other people as a proxy for my own purpose and trying to help other people do stuff without fixing myself. So that was a whole, and we've had a number of conversations on that since. But I think the key thing that I wanted to get across with this is the fact that was the first realization. That was my first going, oh man, I'm not doing things right. I'm using other people as a proxy. This is a negative spiraling system. And so the question I had for everybody else is based on this, is the fact of, if someone's listening right now, what's a first step for them to take when they go, oh man, I'm in a toxic friggin' spiral. I'm going downhill right now because of X, Y, and Z. They've realized they have an issue, or they realize they have a toxic behavioral pattern. What would you recommend as a first step? The first step for me was to recognize that it was me and then start working on that. But what other tools could somebody use? Let's go Sam first. What do you think?
So from my own life experience, it was the question that got asked to me, and I think I've shared this with you before, but it was, do you want to change? Do you actually want to change? And that will come about, or be showing the fruits of that will be action. So you need to look at this and you need to go, okay, where's this inner pull? What behaviors am I showing that don't agree with me, that make me feel that unease? And what action do I need to put in place to change that? What healthy behaviors do I need to do? What's in my control? What's not in my control? So you need to first acknowledge that you are being toxic. That's what we're talking about today. Okay, acknowledged it. That's massive. Okay, but knowledge is not power without action. So what can I action now with that new knowledge? I need to look at that. Do I need to step out of an environment? Do I need to change a behavior? Do I need to stop a behavior? Do I need to implement a new behavior? But these things take time. Some things you can stop overnight. Some things are a process. I always look at guarding your tongue as well. What's coming out of my mouth? Because what's coming out of your mouth is coming from what's in here. Okay, so that's a pretty sure example. So you can tell me that you're a positive, loving person, but if that's not what I'm hearing coming out of your mouth and not what I'm seeing, then it's probably not true of what's inside. So we need to find out who we are there. So yeah, I would ask that honest question: do I actually want to change? And if that is true, then you'll see some fruits of that. You'll see some behavior change.
I love that. Absolutely love it. Sara, what are you thinking?
You know, I agree with kind of everything that has been said. For me personally in my life, it was, realizing that, I was the captain of my own misery, in a sense, and do I want to change, right? And for me, I'm very growth minded. I've been that way for a really, really long time. So I always want to change, but I might not have the tools. So for me, what was profoundly helpful was having someone I trusted who would give me a counter narrative to the one that I had created in my own space, to just show different perspective and different light that could help me reframe so that I could then action what I needed to do to be different or to create the change that I wanted in my own day to day in my own life.
I'm just digging this. Sam, what do you got?
Just jumping on that as well. It's when you listen to people speak, if they say it's because of, and the blame is put elsewhere, I already know that they're not ready to change. Listen to the language. If they've not took ownership and accountability of their actions, of their behaviors, they're not ready to change just yet.
I really dig that one for sure. Sean, you got any thoughts on any of this?
There is nuance there. There is nuance, though. And so I'm going to jump into this. Sam had said, do you want to change? And I think that's a really important question. But how about a question that precedes it? Do you think you should change? Because, unless a person thinks they should change, they could spend the rest of the day saying how much they want to change. I want to change. But do you think you should? Because then it changes the academic question to the more real world, are you in or are you out? Do you really want to? Do you think you should? Is there a reason why you will? Because the do you want to is a glib. Yeah, I do. Yeah, man, I want it all. But that's easy peasy lemon squeezy. But do you think you should change? That answer is telling about a person. If their immediate answer is, no, I got it all figured out. I got it nailed down. I got it locked in. I'm good to go. That is, I don't know. That's not the right answer in my books because I don't know anyone who is totally good to go. So I think that we should all want to change. The instant answer should be, yeah, I do want to change for the better every single second of my life. And by the way, on this topic of breath, none of us are guaranteed anything to the degree of, you're not even guaranteed your next breath. Take in that breath right now as you're listening. That was not guaranteed, nor is the next one. So everything in life is we'll take what we get, we'll give what we give, but at the end of the day, you got to realize that this is all just a gift for us to do our best with. And how you see that do your best with is generally through a lens of what your values are, what you were taught as a kid, who you're surrounded by. And so you represent yourself and you represent all of that stuff that we've talked about to the degree of you represent your club on the BJJ mats to some degree. All of those things have to come back to this, for me, I believe, the central idea of what's it all about, man? Because if this is all just a fleeting experience in the universe and we're all just a little blip on the radar, is the experience just the experience, or are we here for a higher calling, or why are we here, as it were? I think that it's got to be more than just about Sean. And so, as I've said earlier in the podcast, like, I don't have a bunch of answers. I don't have a bunch of solutions. I keep trying to do my best and I still screw things up. But I do it through the lens of trying to serve others. And somehow that makes it all make sense to me. And am I serving Sam and Sara and Chance and every listener right now? I don't know. I'm just trying to serve it all. I can't even put my finger on it. I can't say it's faith. I can't say it's friends. I can't say it's family. I can't say it's my dog. I'm trying to serve it all. And because I can't put a word to it or a title on it, or I can't define it well, I just got to think about it some more. I got to live a fuller life. I've got to talk to cooler people. I got to be exposed to a more open-minded experience in the world. Alan Shabara was on comments throughout the show. I'd love to sit down with Alan in the future on BJJ mats and talk about whatever, the best popsicle in the world. It doesn't matter to me what we talk about. I love experiencing life. I love enriching my life, but all of that is to serve more than just me. Somehow that makes it all make sense to me. And so if I'm trying to serve everything else, then if I'm doing it through known toxicity, what the heck? That's crazy talk, right? So if you truly are trying to help everyone around you, but you know you're toxic, what does that even mean?
That is a very big question. I'm going to hit you guys up. Sara, what do you think?
I mean, I honestly don't know if you can really be interested in serving everyone around you if you consider yourself to be toxic. Like that's a little too conflicting in my brain. I think I'm still trying to get through that one, but I also don't think that experiencing toxicity is bad, right? I don't advocate for seeking drama or trying to surround yourself with situations that, are considered toxic to, forcefully make yourself better. But when they happen in passing, I don't feel sorry for them either, right? Because that's, to Sean's point, some of that enrichment that we get, right? Where, well, that wasn't great for me. I probably don't want to do it that way again. But now I have some perspective on, this, that, or the other, how somebody thinks different from me that can help me, show up better for everyone else going forward.
This goes back to the comment Dan C said earlier, is that, and the conversation we had earlier about the fact that his integrity was never questioned. And to live a life where your integrity, or say your toxicity, was never questioned, then you would 100% believe that you weren't being toxic in that moment. And I don't see a problem with, and oh man, this just brought up the thought of all the people that say, I just tell it like it is. I'm just going to, and immediately you're like, but do you? But those people believe they're being, they're living their life with integrity in that moment. But this is super interesting, and we're going down all kinds of rabbit holes. I love it. Sab, you got any thoughts on any of this?
Like you said, we're going down many rabbit holes here. So I could talk to Sean for hours about when he was talking about serving others. I'm going to really try and pull myself back there. But yeah, so look, who is in our control? Is it others or is it ourselves? so we can control what we do in a situation. And we're talking about the tonic for toxicity here, aren't we? So, well, the tonic is going back to what we were talking about at the start is living what we believe is right and what's truth, and bring that into every situation. And if people have given permission to speak into their lives, then speak into their lives. And I think it's really important to have people around us for accountability, to hold us accountable for our actions and go, do you know what, Sam? That actually wasn't cool what you did there. That wasn't cool what you said there. If I've said something on this tonight and one of my friends who's got that permission to speak into my life has heard me say something that they go, that wasn't right, Sam. I'm going to hold you accountable to that. And I'll go, okay, I'll look at that. Yeah. Because I don't want to bring that toxicity. So allow feedback into your life from people that hold similar value systems. Yeah. So that's my point on that.
I would go so far. I would go so far as to say this, that there isn't a podcast that I've done in my entire life, and now I'm into the plus of 1,000, I suppose, that I haven't said something dumb. And I mean, like, totally regretful dumb. And it's not because I come in like all mean-spirited and trying to like jerk everyone around. As Sam said, like the way I think or the way I interact with the world is I mean, it's a bit quirky at times. And so I am who I am. And Chance, you're stating that I shouldn't be able to get away with saying that. I am who I am. This is who I am. This is what I say. This is what I do. But I know myself well enough that I can say I am who I am. But I also know that I'll be a different person tomorrow based on saying something dumb today on the podcast. And then later tonight, I'll re-watch the podcast as I always do. And then I'll shake my silly head and think, oh man, I got to do it better. And it's not because I want to do it better for me, because I've been embarrassed enough in my life that those things actually don't freak me out too much. I've got to do it better because I'm saying things and people are listening, and I don't want to screw them over. I don't want to lead them astray. I don't want to like shed bad information out there to anybody who knows me and them think that because I said it, it's smart. Well, I say dumb things all the time. And I don't like give myself a rain check on that either. When I say dumb things all the time, like that's not cool. I don't like just shrug my shoulders and say, oh, I said something dumb yesterday and that's cool. I'm going to say something dumb today. No, I really hold myself accountable. I do not like it when I am off base, but I am off base from time to time. But I know it because I'll reflect on it tonight and then I'll try to do it better tomorrow. So no one out there beat yourself up too badly if time to time you're doing it wrong. Chances are I'm doing it 10 times worse than you are most of the times. So no one is running a perfect program. No one has got it all figured out. In fact, if you think you do, you just haven't made enough mistakes to realize that you're going to make mistakes the rest of your life. So with that said, I'm curious, Sam, if your friends listen to any of this later this week or tomorrow, whatever the case is, do you have a small handful of friends that you would kind of, I guess, label as I trust them to give me feedback? And then in that small group, there's like one or two that you've actually said, and you're authorized to give me feedback. I know that's like a loose statement. Because for me, I don't have that. What I have is this, an open challenge to anyone that knows me. If I say something dumb today, hit me up later and let me know. Because I'm just trying to do better. And I know my own processes to improve, but I know that external observation helps improve me way quicker. And so I have trusted mentors and friends, peers, etc., my family, my dog. All of them give me feedback on how I can do it better. But I'll take any feedback from anyone. Doesn't mean that I'll take it to heart. It means that I will take feedback, consider it, and see how I can become a better person from it. So again, open challenge to the entire interwebs. If I screw it up today, let me know.
Just in answer to your question there, I'm the same. I will receive feedback from everyone, but that feedback always needs weighed. So who am I receiving that feedback from? How much weight does that carry? But I also do have people very trusted, close to me that speak into my life, including my partner. So I do think that's important. Also, just to throw something out there to the group, I'm curious what you think of this. I was thinking of what is toxic. And for me, I was imagining that a little bottle of toxic living inside you. So things like hate, unforgiveness, resentment, I would class those as toxic behaviors. So if you're holding on to those things right now for somebody, I would argue that you have something toxic within you, and at some point that's going to flow out of you. What are our thoughts on that?
That's an awesome image. Sarah, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of those feelings are very natural, right? Disappointment, you know, hate, anger, whatever it might be, or how deeply you want to process down the core feeling or emotion. But at the end of the day, if that is going to foster some sort of resentment or ill will, like within the self, like it will always manifest out, and usually not to the person you actually have those feelings to. I'm not the best at quickly letting it go. You know, I might need to ruminate or just like huff and puff for a little bit. But for me, that's how I process to let those things go, because I agree, it's if you have them, it's toxic. It will ultimately probably lead to you expressing some sort of negative thing towards others. But usually there's going to be, in my experience, I've observed that it's going to be accumulation of things versus just one single item that tips the scale that way.
I would agree as well. I get this image, and this is from an anti-smoking commercial. I don't know why my brain is on smoking so much on this one, but there was a commercial. The person was talking, and as they were talking, it was like showing the removal of all the tar coming out of their mouth as they were speaking, and that's the image that I got in my mind, Sam, when you were talking. The fact that toxicity that you're holding on to, that I was holding on to for many years, or it spews out with everything that you speak. And whether you're trying to do it you're trying to do your best, or you're trying to, help other people, if you're holding on to any sort of toxicity in any way, that's going to start coming out, and it's going to start layering onto other people, and that's going to affect their sense of toxicity and their ability to manage themselves as well, because you're just going to be adding more crap to their life that then they have to friggin' deal with. And now I got to, et cetera, this person and that person and so on and so forth. It's it's kind of a never ending cycle for sure. Sean, you got any thoughts on this?
I do. So here's what I thought when Sam mentioned that is I think that we all of us have emotions, obviously. Our understanding of our emotions, how to manage those emotions, how to use those emotions to our benefit and all those around us rather than be detrimental. These are all great questions. And that's again another podcast. But the image that kind of came to me was, that poison coming out of you. And that's like every word that you say out loud is laced with that poison to some degree. If you're not like properly put together inside your internal world, if it's chaotic and unstructured and ununderstood, then your external world reflects that. The next word that you say will be laced with some poison. And so who's in front of you when you're talking is the other interesting aspect of this, because as you're putting out that poison, and again, that poison could be like a really faint poison, or it could be like strong poison. The person that you're delivering that to or against or around, if that person is sensitive, like if they're young or if they haven't developed an immunity to the poison or haven't developed a way to heal up quickly from the poison, then a few casual words done wrong can effectively poison that person for the rest of their life. And so every word that you put out can ripple on through eternity, as it were. And so who's in front of you is a boutique person, is a unique person, is an individual person. And if you're constantly delivering a rote or a pattern of speech that is unconsidered, if you just keep on putting out your regular same old, laced with a hint of poison, there'll be someone who steps up in front of you who is prepared for that and can manage it and will just brush it off, no big deal. But there will be other people who are sensitive souls, and that is not for them. And so you have to be sensitive to the world, not just your own needs and your singular delivery of your semi-toxic poison.
I love that.
Yeah. This reminds me of something really interesting in the difference between poisonous and venomous. In that, if it's poisonous and you eat it, you ingest it, you take it in, then it's damaging. But venomous is if I bite you and then you take injury from that. And it made me think of how we interact with one another. So if I'm a poisonally toxic person, if you listen to what I have to say, then that contagion is going to get inside you. That toxicity is going to get inside you. But if you are a venomously poisonous or venomously toxic person, then I'm going to be spitting at everybody. And if you're in the splash zone, you're going to get it on you, kind of deal. So I think it's a really interesting way to delineate between these different.
So
setups.
what's the anti venom?
Well, see,
let's hit the anti venom before we go to final thoughts.
I was just about to hit that. What do you got, Sam?
For me on that, so I think it's actually great what you said. Imagine if we all were thinking before we spoke, how are my words affecting this person? And what comes to my mind there is take the log out your own eye before you take the speck out of someone else's. And I know it's above us, but it's so true. We're so quick to see that speck in someone's eye when we've got a big log hanging out of our own. We're quick to dismiss our toxic things, but we're very quick to let somebody else know about theirs. So that would be my antidote to that, is really actually start thinking about, maybe I should start thinking about the log in my own eye before I start commenting on the speck in yours.
I love that. Sarah, what are you thinking?
So I think I'll take the point then of, as the receiver, is that I think that strong sense of self and that ability to stay curious and review the information that's coming at you for truth and validity. And, is it about me? Is this directed at me, or is this completely unrelated to me? So that way you can build that resilience and that questioning mind of, does this need to stay relevant in my life, right? Like we're on a podcast currently, but there's so many out there now, and depending on what you're consuming, right? If you're just kind of in the rut, you're like, yeah, this is so great, I'm so gassed up on this. But how often do we sit back and question, is this helping me be better? Is this helping me grow? Or is this feeding, some self-fulfilling loop that keeps me in my own misery?
And it is a self-fulfilling prophecy without a doubt if you sit in it for too long. Sean, what are you thinking? Oh, and he's muted.
Sorry. Yeah, it is easy to fall into that trap of the listening to things that we have listened to for a long time, and over a period of time, those things just kind of start derailing. And it's not that we intentionally decided to start listening to things that aren't serving as well. It's just that that's the way the system is built. Bit by bit, you just slippery slope, and now you're off the edge of the train trestle, as it were. And so you have to pay attention. We all have to pay attention. All of us, me, you, everyone. We've just got to keep an eye on the world around us, the external world. And so I know it's going to be terrible, but if the external world is the cobra about to hit you with that venomous strike, I'd ask, where does the antivenom come from? And I think that most people who would listen to that in their mind's eye right now would be reaching up onto the shelf to grab the antivenom, to grab the needle, to inject it, and wow, now I'm saved. But I'm stating that the antivenom does not exist in the external world. The antivenom is inside of you. The antivenom is one for you to develop, a new antivenom for you and the world that you live in. There's a way for you to exist in the external world, but pay way more attention to your internal world and start working on these, I'll call it a vaccine, against these problems. And so, much like any antivenom, they don't fall out of the tree magically. They have to be created specifically for that snake and that snake and that snake. You're the one who's developing them. We can give you ingredients for various antivenoms. We'll call the ingredients tips and tricks and tonics for these kind of problems. But ultimately, each snake needs a unique antivenom. And so your internal world needs to build that antivenom for each of these problematic issues. And if you don't know how to build those antivenoms in your internal world, find people who do. Find a mentor who is, or a friend who is just really feels grounded and centered and positive and non-toxic. And when you're around them, you feel uplifted, perhaps. Chances are they've learned a thing or two along the way. And chances are their internal world is probably doing better than your internal world. So go find someone who can help you put together your antivenom.
So I'm glad you brought up antivenom because, interestingly enough, antivenom is made from venom. It's a distilled version of the venom itself. So when we're talking about toxicity and toxic patterns and, how to, the tonic for toxicity, it's in the toxicity. It's in our own version of like what we see as toxic, and then distilling it down into a tonic that we can then use for ourselves and for the people around us and all that stuff. And I dig it so much. We are just about at 2 hours now, though, and I really do appreciate the conversation. I'm sure we could sit here and talk for another 2 or 7 or 15. But we might need to sleep at some point. So we're going to shut her down and get some final thoughts on anything that we've covered so far, from tonics to toxicity to all of it. Sara, any final thoughts?
Yeah, thank you guys again so much for having me on. If I could just impart one thing, it's that we are all toxic. It's just part of it, but it's how we take accountability for ourselves and ownership for how we present ourselves into the world.
Bam. I love it. Sam, final thoughts?
We've had a lot here, haven't we? I just want to thank you, and I just want to encourage you both, actually. So I guess my final thought would, if you're looking at every environment, what you're in, are you the encourager or are you the energy zapper? And I just want to encourage you both, because obviously I've not been on here for a long time, and the growth of this podcast and the professionalism that you're doing now and the newsletters you're now handing out and how it all looks, I think it's absolutely fantastic. So for what it's worth, I just want to encourage you both, and well done on what you're doing.
Well, we appreciate it, truly. And this is why we keep doing it, when people are getting stuff out of it. Sean, final thoughts?
Thanks, buddy. I really appreciate that. I will say this, that probably the best antivenom, universal antivenom. Of course, I'd stated that, each snake can have a unique antivenom, but of course there is a universal antivenom. In fact, just popped into my head, there's a dude just recently, I'm sure we all saw it. He took like 200 bites he just let snakes bite him until his internal world created, to some degree, a universal antivenom. And so he's the first guy I've ever seen in history that has done this. And so, I mean, that's pretty rad. It's pretty bold. It's pretty daring. But I guess along the way, he saw why it was important. He wasn't just working for himself. He wasn't just taking snake bites because it amused him. He had a higher calling. He had a bigger purpose. He was there to serve the team. He was leading to some degree. And so I wonder if he was leading for the team just because he wanted notoriety, or because he genuinely, for his love of his family, his friends, his city. I wonder if love is what allowed him to take all of those bites. So here's my proposal. I think that the best anti-venom you can have is love. And if you are struggling to love your fellow man, if you are struggling to only love half of your fellow man and dislike the other half, these are things that you need to think about. And I would suggest that if you're dividing your love where it is convenient for you, then you just don't understand what the anti-venom is.
That's a fantastic point. Couple last minute comments here. John Minari jumped in here, said, great show, Bravo Zulu. And then he says, great feedback, Sam, 100%. The only thing I really want to touch on at the end of this is the fact that, in my mind, the tonic for toxicity, as you guys stated, is love. Really, it is. But it's self-love. It is external love. It is it is a love of life. It is a very generalized love. I find that when we start to, anytime we start to direct it, and well, it's for these people versus that people. Well, it's for this thing, but not that thing. And it just general kind of openness. And I think to that point, the only really other piece of it is to just do your best. That's why we got it on the mug. And I think that's really the thing I want to end off on. So as we
also
all
pick up the pace on the love,
pick up the pace a little bit. I mean, that's maybe. But as we all continue to learn, build, and grow, we'll see y'all next time. Chimo. Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.